Hey everyone, welcome to Fight Stories. I'm Tyler Morrison. I'm here with John Moses, and today we have a special guest, NHL alumni, Bob McGill. We're very happy to have you here, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, great to be here with you.
Yeah, as a couple Toronto Maple Leafs longtime fans,
Oh
it's always
yeah,
great
yeah.
to be able to chat with some of the players on the show, and I mean you had a couple stints with Toronto, right? That's
Yeah, I was drafted by the Leafs back in 1980, and I spent my first 6 years of my career in the Toronto organization. And then I came back for a year in 92, 93 after spending, 4 years in Chicago, and then going out to San Jose in the expansion draft. Ended up in the expansion again with Tampa, but became a free agent and came back to Toronto. So I was obviously, my time in Toronto, and I worked for them at after everything was all done with in hockey. I started doing some TV stuff and worked 16 years for Leafs TV. So allegiance to the Toronto Maple Leafs are pretty strong, I would say.
I remember you as a Toronto Maple Leaf, but then I was looking at your stat card, and I was like, man, I was like a child when you were there, like when you spent your career there. I was like a 6 and 7 year old boy. It's just funny how these things imprint.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, like my first year, and I've come to find out, years, after my career and stuff, and being part of the Leaf alumni, that I had 263 minutes in penalties my first year, and that's the Leaf rookie record, and it will
nice.
never get broken as far as I can concerned,
Yeah,
because nobody
yeah,
gets those kind of penalty minutes today. So it's kind of a cool to have at least one kind of a record in my career, I guess, is not a bad thing.
yeah, for sure.
That's a record that will never be broken unless someone goes full Happy Gilmore, takes off their skate and tries to stab someone. I think you're good.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so when you were a kid growing up, were you a Leaf fan, or were you, a,
No, I was not a Maple Leafs fan. I wasn't a Maple Leafs fan until I was drafted by the Maple Leafs. Growing up in small town Alberta, Leduc, Alberta, just outside of Edmonton, we never had a National Hockey League team. So I was a Boston Bruins fan, obviously, because of Bobby Orr. I wanted to be like Bobby Orr, and obviously, quite a bit different a player. I used to say when I was a kid in minor hockey, I kind of was like Bobby Orr in minor hockey, and then you go to Tier 2 junior hockey at 16 years of age, and it's like bang, hitting up against a brick wall. And fortunately, I had an older brother. He was 2 years older than me. He played for the New Westminster Bruins in the Western Hockey League, and he played Tier 2 for the 2 years before me, and he got in a bunch of scraps, and then I got into a couple fights, and I kind of did pretty well, and I had, this is kind of fun and whatever. So that I obviously that the pool shrinks, and you've got to find other ways. Your days of being a minor hockey player where you kind of ran the show offensively, all of a sudden, guess what? You can't do that anymore. What else can you bring to the table? And being, a tough guy kind of helped me learn to get my foot in the door to be able to show that I could to belong in the league. But then you had to learn to play, obviously, and show that you could stay there.
Absolutely. Did you, when you came into the junior league, do you remember your first fight in junior? Like, was that something that really stood out to you, or was it?
No, you know what? I don't remember the very first one, but I do remember being maybe only, because I was 16 years old and playing for the Abbotsford Flyers in the BCJHL. And I can remember we were probably about 10 games into the season, and we were playing in Langley, and it ended up like full-scale brawl. And I was like, never been a part of that ever. And it was like, oh my God, it was crazy. And I ended up, taking on the big tough guy at the end of the brawl kind of thing, and it was pretty wild. But it's just something where I don't know, like I've always had pretty good balance, so that was something where when I got into the fight and you would be twisting and turning around, whatever, I could keep my balance pretty good. So I got in those few fights, and obviously the guys in the team would rally around you, and you sort of build on that a little bit and go from there. But when I went to Major Junior at 17, I played in Victoria, and my older brother played for the New Westminster Bruins, and so they were kind of our arch rivals. And it was funny because I was bigger than my older brother, and he played left wing, I played right defense, played against each other, and that season we fought 3 times.
That is amazing.
First one wasn't the greatest fight, but the second and the third were each kind of closer to the end of the season. And I tell you, the fans freaked out when they were announcing the names of both the guys in the box, and we're laughing at each other in the box. And he won the second one, and then I got a chance to win the third one. But the last 2 were real knock him down, drag him out kind of fights. It was pretty.
So you guys are really trying to hurt each other?
Well, when you're getting a fight, you're not trying to not win. So
yeah,
for sure. And little brother trying to show big brother that he was tougher, and big brother trying to show little brother that he still owned me.
He's still the dominant force. Yeah.
That's great. Were your parents in attendance at these games?
The very first one they were, yeah, because it was in an actually exhibition game. But they weren't at the last 2. But they used my mom just kind of laughed about it. She thought, oh, whatever, as long as nobody got hurt, it was all good.
Oh, that's hilarious. Did your brother have a reputation of being a fighter in the league too, or?
Yeah, he was he was a forward, but he was, he wasn't a goal scorer, but he was a big penalty killer and shot blocker, and he fought a lot because he was like 5'11", but when he started at tier 2 when he was 16, he was only like 165 pounds. And,
yeah.
He played at about 185, I guess it was, back in then. But unfortunately, he didn't. He never ended up turning pro. But we still get a few chuckles about it all the time when we talk about it.
Yeah, he's got you on his fight card, so he can brag about that.
Oh, yeah, you got
nice. And playing in junior hockey out there, it was a much rougher league than it is that we see today. Was there any kind of like any players that you tangled with back in junior that you ended up running into in the show when you were in the NHL?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, probably the most notable would have been Tim Hunter.
Oh yeah.
We fought a couple times. In fact, he was my first stitches I ever got in a fight. He split my lip, and I had to get stitches. He was playing for Seattle Breakers, and when I was in Victoria, and we fought a couple times in junior, and then we fought 3 or 4 times in pro as well. So, yeah.
Oh, man, he was a real technician when he fought. Like, he was really good at, like, switching hands. Did you find, like, when you were fighting him that he was pulling that stuff, like, you'd have to switch up quite a bit?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because even my first year in the NHL, like, in junior hockey, a lot of guys, we used to grab the guy right kind of center chest. And both guys it was like the old saying was, you got to take a few to give a few, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, like, he was one of those guys where he would grab your right and whatever, and it's kind of like, hey, that's not fair. Like, I'm not, whatever. And and my first in the NHL too, guys, they had technique of grabbing you and holding your and forcing you to have to switch things up, and you weren't used to that, but obviously, over the years you find different ways to do different stuff. You got to be a tactician, as you say, because you got to be pretty tactical if you want to survive at it.
Yeah, exactly. And Tim Hunter, for the people that aren't familiar with him, check him out on YouTube. I mean, he had some amazing fights. He was the guy who kind of figured out Dave Semenko. He was, with the
old Hunts. He had over 2,000 penalty minutes in the
it's
National
insane.
Hockey League. So certainly he was a huge team player and a great, and a real good tough guy, and won a Stanley Cup with the Calgary Flames. And when I was doing the TV stuff with the Maple Leafs, he came on board as assistant coach with Ronnie Wilson when coaching the Leafs. So I got a chance to chat with him quite a bit and stuff
nice.
over the years and talk about old fights and old times, and it's always a good time.
That's awesome. And so with the guys who you kind of come up with like as rookies, do you ever run into those guys now, or is there I guess like that early Leafs 80s crew? What was that like?
Boy. Well, yeah, it's interesting, Tyler and John. We came up, I was a 19-year-old, Freddie Boimstruck was 19, and Jimmy Benning was only 18. So we were kind of, I remember we were on the front cover of the Hockey News, Toronto's Babes on the Blue Line, they called. And it was the good, the bad, and the gifted. Well, guess which one I was? I wasn't the gifted, and I wasn't the good. So anyway, but I will say, hey, I played the most games of the three of us. So
nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, literally, you're of the names mentioned, you're the one I remember. So
yeah, well, and Jimmy Benning, I've talked to him, over the years, because obviously, he got into scouting, and then he was assistant GM in Boston when they won the Stanley Cup, and then he was GM in Vancouver, and in fact, when he was GM there, we got together a few times and had sit and chat and did stuff all the time. But Freddie Boimstruck was interesting. He got sent down to the American League probably in the mid-November, our second year. I went down just after Christmas, and I finished the year in the American League and played almost the whole year the next year before I got called back up, and then never went back down to the minors, where Freddie played 3 years, or like the rest of that year 2, and all of year 3. And then he played a year for the Mott's Clamatos. We're going for the Allen Cup, I believe it was. And then he was out of hockey. So he played like 3 years pro and whatever. Yeah. He ended up, he got a job with CN, I believe, on the railway, and he ended up being an engineer, driving trains and whatever. But I never got an opportunity. I've never seen Freddie since. So that's kind of sad. But it's funny, when I talk to guys, they always said to me, when you can play, 8, 10, 12, 15 years, whatever. He said, if you've got guys on your full hand that you talk to on a regular basis, kind of the rest of your life, you'll be lucky. And it's very true, because I've got 2 fingers left over from my 13 years of playing, pro hockey, of guys. I got 3 guys that I sort of keep in contact with all the time. But I mean, obviously with the Leaf alumni and being in Ontario myself, we do a bunch of stuff with the Leaf alumni, so we get to see guys all the time, and it's a lot of fun when you get the opportunity to get together with the boys and talk old stories and
for sure
lies.
Oh, that's great. And so I guess the one question I have for you is, when you come into the league, you're a 19-year-old as a rookie, right? And was there anyone on the team that kind of took you under their wing, sort of like maybe another guy who was doing your job as well, or even just like a leader?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, I at 19 years old, come into training camp. I mean, I thought I was the toughest thing since sliced bread, right? We had, back then, they used to have rookie camp, and it was in St. Catharines. They had rookie camp before main camp started. And they brought in all the tough guys and all the guys that played in the minors and stuff for that week of rookie camp. And I'll tell you, the first 2 days of the rookie camp, the safest thing on the ice was the puck. Oh my God, there were so many fights, because guys, they were trying to establish who would. And I think that when rookie camp broke, I came out. I think I had 8 fights in the rookie camp. Like
Oh
it was,
wow.
I mean, it was crazy. Like, but I just found that the Leaf guys, the Wilf Paymonts and guys like that were they kind of took me under their wing, and Daryl Sittler was there. He got traded at Christmas time, but Dan Maloney. So there was a lot of veteran players, Rennie Robert, Donnie Luce. Like there was a lot of older veteran guys, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you, they were so good at trying to always make you feel good and feel comfortable when you're on the road or on in practice time, and after get you out for dinner once in a while to their house, things like that, to try and sort of help you feel like you're part of everything.
Oh, that's so important too. Coming in, and you're coming in from a different part of the country, and getting having a group of mentors on a club like that is so clutch. And then, question for you though, in that training camp, do you remember any of the guys that you tangled with on
Oh
that
God!
team?
Well, there's the one guy, and I fought him I think 3 times, and Mel Hewitt was his name, and he played. He was a legend in Saginaw, the old Saginaw Gears of the International Hockey League, and everybody said, oh, you better watch out because he's whatever, and of course, after I had a fight, and then he wanted to show that he was one of the guys at camp and stuff like that. And we fought a couple times there in training camp and stuff, but I mean, that was sort of the more memorable guy, because he was probably a 26, 27-year-old guy back then, had been around and had probably 15, 1,700 minutes in penalties over his career playing in the IHL. So having tangled with him and doing okay was a good thing.
Yeah, and did you know his reputation before that camp? Were you like thinking, this is a guy I should probably target to get looked at?
Well, I mean, when you got to camp, guys were talking about, because Kim Claxon was there. It was crazy, the amount of guys that they had at camp and stuff. And so, believe me, when you're a guy that might be dropping your gloves, and you ask around beforehand of who the tough guys are, to make sure that you know who they are, so that you're going to be ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess, okay, so that's a good question. Are you seeing any of these guys in the dressing room beforehand? Is there any like tension, animosity? Are you like, oh man, this guy looks ripped?
Or just, guys would say like, oh, you better watch out, this guy, he's crazy, or he's a lefty and whatever. So you wanted to know a little bit about different guys for sure, in case it came to dropping the gloves. But it was one of those things where when I was there at camp, I mean, my year before in junior playing in Victoria, I mean, we won the Western Hockey League Championship. We lost in the Memorial Cup, and we didn't win the Memorial Cup, but I had 295 penalty minutes that year, so I don't know how many fights I had, but my fair few for sure. But I went in and was thinking that, hey, I'm gonna try and make a mark for sure in training camp, and that certainly went a long ways towards me, getting an opportunity to play in the National Hockey League.
And for the when you get into the roster regularly on the Leafs, is there anyone who is sort of sharing that the tough guy role with you, or is there are you kind of the lone wolf to start out?
Well, we didn't, back. I mean, I was kind of the new gunslinger, I guess you could call it, but Dan Maloney was the grizzled veteran, right? And I mean, man, his reputation preceded him, and he was one of those guys where I was really intimidated by him, right? And I was glad that he was my teammate, And then, he retired after the season and then ended up being assistant coach and became the head coach for a couple of years before he ended up moving on and going to Winnipeg. But, I just found, when you look back on it, every team had guys, they had 2, 3, 4 guys that were as tough as anybody.
Yeah.
And then you had team guys that were like sleeper tough guys, right? Where they didn't play very often, but when they did, it was like all of a sudden they'd kick the shit out of somebody, and you're like, what the hell did that come from? And it's like Al McAdam played for Minnesota North Stars. He was tough. He used to beat the crap out of guys, and guys would have thought it, right? Because he was real quiet, unassuming guy and whatever, and force him into dropping his gloves, and you better watch out because he's going to take care of business.
Yeah, there's always those hidden nail guns you got to watch out for. Would you find that like a Gary Howitt was that type of guy?
Oh yeah, he was tough. I mean, I fought. I'll never forget. We, back when I played, they still had the rookie initiation, right? And they shaved my head, so I had the shaved head going. Well, no different than today, right? Right. But,
foretelling.
It was interesting. The day before, after practice, they got me and had me taped down. I got my rookie initiation, whatever, and they shaved my head. And I show up I bought a cowboy hat before we left to get on the plane to fly to Hartford, and we're playing against the Whalers the next day. And Gary Howitt, I fought him twice that night, and it was funny because when I lost, my helmet came off and everything, and it was just one of those things. But he was, Gary Howitt. I mean, he wasn't the biggest guy, but boy, he was back in the day of the Broad Street Bullies and all that, boy. And I'll tell you, he was one tough guy. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, like those Islanders teams were super team tough. You had the Clark Gillies that everyone knew he could, if you woke him up, he could hit hard. But then you had Nystrom, and you fought Nystrom too, right?
Yeah.
What was that? How did that one go? Because he's tough.
I only fought him one time, and it was interesting because it happened. He came at me kind of from, we were behind the net, and then when we started, getting going, whatever, and I pushed him a little bit, and he tripped on the net, and we both fell down, and that was kind of the end of the fight. And it was like, that, and then that's really the only time I ever fought him. And I remember him fighting Jim Korn, teammate, and it was like, ooh, like corny. It was not a good thing for Jimmy Korn. I'll tell you, Bobby and I, like, absolutely, like, wow. He teed off on him. It was like, it was a good thing I don't have to fight this guy very often because he was tough. He was crazy tough.
Was there a favorite barn to fight in?
My favorite? You know what? It's interesting because I was very fortunate and lucky that I got a chance to play for 4 years in the old Chicago Stadium. Right. But, when I started, obviously the Blackhawks in the Chuck Norris division with the Leafs, and, getting into it, the first time I ever played in Chicago, I fought Al Secord twice. And then, I fought Ben Wilson twice one night there in Chicago Stadium. And I'll tell you, there's not the atmosphere. And I mean,
really?
Like when I played for the Leafs, we would go into Chicago and we always played well there. Like in 85, 86, our first opportunity to play in the playoffs, we finished 47 points behind Chicago. They were first, we were fourth. We played them first. That was the last year they had the best of 5 series. We swept them. But regular season, we were 7-0-1 against Chicago, including 3-0-1 in the stadium. So we used to just let the national anthem would start playing, and I mean, we would be going nuts in the bench, screaming and yelling. I thought we always used to say, if you can't be up for a game in Chicago Stadium after they sing that national anthem, you might as well take your stuff and go back down the stairs to the dressing room.
Oh, cool.
Well, that was the place where, and that the time when I fought Ben Wilson twice in the game, the first time was one of those plays where, there was a face-off was in, or the goalie stopped the puck, and Steve Ludzik came in and he tried to dig the puck out from underneath the goalie's glove or whatever, and I hacked at him, whatever, and then the face-off comes, same thing happens again. Well, Ben Wilson starts chirping at me from the blue line, hey, blah, 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 whatever, and I don't have any idea why, but I was like, oh yeah, and I literally skated out to center ice in the stadium, dropped my gloves on, and all of a sudden he turns, drops the gloves, I'm going, oh no, what? What am I thinking? And it ended up being like a great fight and whatever. But to me, he was when we fought the second time, it was at the end of the game. We were losing the game. It was like a 5-1 game or something. And the coach throws me out on the ice to play right wing in the last minute. So what do you think? I'm going to dump the puck in and I'm running. I tried to run through the Keith Brown was the Ben Wilson's defense partner, and I tried to put him through the first row of seats. And he moved out of the way, but the old Chicago saying the boards used to go whoa and back. But Ben comes back in, and I'll tell you, it was like he lost his shit. His eyes flipped up in his head and whatever. I thought he was going to freaking kill me. And Jeff Brubaker at the time started another fight with somebody else, so the refs are whatever, gone and whatever. And like Ben Wilson is like losing it, and it was like, I'm like, where's the refs? Like, somebody better get in here and help me before.
Right. You know you're alone. Right.
Oh, no kidding.
And before the Wilson fight, of Wilson's reputation in the league. He's pretty well respected as a fighter, right?
Without a doubt. I mean, he's, that, beforehand, but, and had never seen him fight like in person. So, yeah, it was just one of those things. Again, when you're a young guy, you think that you're tougher than everybody, right? And bring it on and whatnot. But it's funny how that sort of changes over the years and how the game changed. Where, at the end of my career, like I'm 6'1", and I played between 188 and 192.
Yeah.
And, at the end of my career, freaking the new guys coming in, they're like 6'4", 6'5", 230, 240. I'm like, holy jumping, man. Like, I'm not the guy on the end of the bench where I'm sitting there and you just tap on the back because I can't do, I'm not big enough to take on these guys, but if I got to fight them, I'm going to fight them, but I'm not going looking for those guys.
Right.
So earlier on, you're feeling more fearless than when you have a little experience later on that you're just going,
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, it is, it's funny because I think I spent, 10 years in the Norris division, and, the rivalries between Detroit and Chicago and St. Louis and Minnesota, it was just like, and all the four other teams in the division all had, tough guys and whatever. So every game it was like a war, right? And you better hope that it wasn't a lopsided score in either direction, because you knew that there was going to be stuff happening in the game, right?
Oh, for
sure. What was the fiercest rivalry for when you were in Chicago? Was it Detroit? Because I felt like as a casual fan of
and
that,
St.
of
Louis
that rivalry.
too. St. Louis as well, and but Minnesota was too, because Minnesota and Chicago, before I went to Chicago, Minnesota and Chicago, they had a couple playoff series that were really nasty, big fight, bench clearing brawls or 5-man brawls or line brawls and stuff like that. And but I just found like that whole division was so intense, and and it didn't matter who was playing each other. It seemed like it was a massive rivalry for sure.
And then the other question I had for you is, so when you played with the Leafs, you played for John Brophy, right? Was he one of your coaches?
Yeah.
Do you have any good Brophy stories? Because everyone talks about how he was a wild man. That's
You know what, bro? It was funny. I just played golf with Mark Osborne yesterday, and he was at something, and he said the guys got together and were like to get the get some John Brophy stories going. Oh man, he was. I mean, he used to flip his wig, right, and just lose it. And I'll never forget. One night we're playing in Minnesota, and we're losing 4-1 after the first period, and he comes in and he just like loses it, and he's like, "Hi, Fruity, what are you doing out there?" and Todd Gill had coughed up the puck, and he goes, "Todd Gill, you got about as much intensity as my dick right now, and that's one." and Steve Thomas, he was finally up playing in the National Hockey League full time, and Stevie Thomas, he goes, "Steve Thomas," he said, it's only 70 miles to St. Catharines, but it's 7,000 miles back. And Brophy would just, it was, I mean, you would have to stop yourself from laughing sometimes, because he would absolutely just lose it. But I'll tell you a great story is that it's probably at least 10 years ago now. Leaf alumni go out east during the winter to do a little tour, to play some charity games to raise a bunch of money out in Nova Scotia. And they're driving along. They're in a van, and there's like 10 of them in a van, in this big club van thing. And they're going through Antigonish, Nova Scotia. And they go, "Oh my God," Mark Osborne says, "Hey, this is where John Brophy is. He's in a home here." He called somebody who knew, who had spoken, and they went to the home where Brophy lived. And I'll tell you, he was tickled, because it was like all the guys that played for him too. It was Tommy Fergus, Dan Daou, Mark Osborne, a few other guys like that, and they had, like, Brof was so excited when he saw all the guys, and he said, see, I wasn't lying to you. I was the coach of the Maple Leafs. He's saying these older people in the home and stuff, but Brof, I mean, it was a really great thing, and the guys sort of sent some texted a picture with them all with Brof and stuff like that, and I think he passed on maybe about two and a half years later. But it was a very cool thing, because Brof, it's funny because he was, you take him away from the rink, and he was such a terrific guy, but it was like when you walked into the arena, all of a sudden it was like, he would be just like, and his intensity just like went through the roof, and he wanted to win so badly, and he couldn't tolerate guys not doing certain things and whatnot, but he was a classic.
The Leafs in that era too. I mean, you guys had some tougher years, but when like Wendel Clark comes along, does that give you guys sort of like a new energy?
Without question. And like the year before, the 84-85 season, we finished dead last in the league. That's why we got the first pick, and we got Wendel, right? And, we hadn't been in the playoffs for a couple years. Instantly when Wendel came in, it renewed, it injected such new life into the franchise. It was unbelievable. And, a new beginning. And, we ended up, we made the playoffs that year. We beat out Chicago in the first round, and we lost 2-1 to St. Louis in St. Louis, Game 7, to go to the conference finals. And so that it obviously it was quite the quite
in his
quite
rookie season.
Quite the feather in our cap to win around and go. Well, the next year we beat Detroit, we beat St. Louis in the first round, and then we lost to Detroit in Game 7 in Detroit. Unfortunately, because I thought that we were the better team, and one of those things. But yeah, Wendel coming in was, as you guys know as Leaf fans, I mean, he is Mr. Toronto Maple Leaf. Wendel Clark is, and you know what, he really defines what a true grit sort of player, and what he's done for that franchise and continues to do today. It's really amazing to see.
For sure. And did you know, had you seen him play before he came to the NHL, or was it sort of you just got your first, view of him when you were playing in camp?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, we saw him play in the World Juniors because he, obviously, being broadcast, the World Junior, that's when it really had become sort of to the forefront, starting in the Christmas holidays. So we watched Wendel, and I think they won the gold, I believe.
He's a defenseman, right? At first?
He was. Yeah, they had him playing defense and forward, actually. And so he comes to Toronto, and first day of training camp, first scrimmages, I fought him twice.
Oh, you fought Clark twice?
Well, Wendel twice in his first day of training camp. Obviously, I was the sort of resident tough guy, and whatever. The young guy came out, and he was trying to set his mark first day of training camp, and a couple of good scraps. It was good, and it's funny because we fought a couple other times when I was in Chicago. We fought a couple times as well, and you know what I mean. It's one of those things, right? Where, you do what you got to do to win games, to help sway some momentum to your team's side and stuff. But Wendel was much more than that, where, he was such a dominant player, and, he was the resurgence of the Maple Leafs organization certainly is firmly on the shoulders of Wendel Clark.
Absolutely.
So you guys fight in camp, and then so it breaks up. You guys give each other a little tap on the pads or whatever, and then you guys are teammates for a couple of years. Are you friends or friendly when you guys square up? When you're playing on Chicago.
No, you know what? It's interesting with that, right? And like Basil McRae, for instance. Basil McRae and I played together in St. Catharines in the American Hockey League. And then when I got traded to Chicago, he had signed that summer. He was a UFA. He signed with Minnesota North Stars. And, I chat with Baz now, even still now today. He works with Columbus Blue Jackets. And, we fought, a few times with Minnesota, again, when he was at St. Louis and whatever. And you know what? If I see him off the ice, we always got time to sit and chat and whatever. But hey, when you're on the ice in a game, hey, we know what our job is, man. And it's like nobody ever had to tell me what my job was. And and it's interesting enough because Bob Probert, it was interesting because we one night in Detroit. In fact, it was remember the headbutt incident? We had the full-scale brawl against Red Wings, and I'm fighting Probert for friggin' 5 minutes. And at the end of it, we're tired, whatever, and he headbutts me. So it's the next time we play Detroit, gotta fight him, right?
Yeah.
It's my, I gotta, play again. So sure enough, near the end of the second period, in front of our net, he comes and I bang, and we go, and it was a long fight, and whatever.
That was a great fight.
So after the game, we're staying overnight in Detroit after the game. So the guys are going out for, like, hey, we're going to go for a few beers, whatever. And he said, well, how are we going to get there, whatever? And I'm standing with Chris Katsopoulos, and Todd Gill goes, oh, yeah. He says, I got a ride for us, whatever. So we're waiting. All of a sudden, Todd Gill comes around the corner. His buddy, Bob Probert. Me and Kotze get in the back. Oh, hey, Probert, how you doing? Whatever. The back seat of the car. And
that's awesome.
One of the, he drops us off. And he drops us off. We go into the bar or whatever. Oh, see you later. And, and then, fought him probably another 4 times after that in my career. And then, we ended up, I got traded to Detroit from San Jose at the trade deadline back in 92. And that was probably the most surreal moment, of my career, because, you're carrying my bag and I'm walking into the Detroit Red Wings dressing room, and, I spent 10 years arch rival. They freaking hated like Stevie Y and all of it. They hated me, right? And here I'm walking in. Oh, hi guys, how you doing? And whatever, right? But just walking in there, it was like my stomach was doing somersaults, man. It was like the lion's den room, thinking, oh, I'm gonna go. I have to go and introduce myself to all these guys, but. You know what? You're there for 1 minute, and it's like, hey, you're part of the team, and whatever. So it's all good. But Probert, Bobby, was one of those guys where, like, hey, he'll drop you and kick the shit out of you one night, and whatever. You can meet him somewhere the next day, and he'll, hey, how you doing? Whatever, right? It's like, it's business.
Give you a ride.
Business, yeah. It's part of what you do. And there's some guys like. I mean, it's funny because when I was in Chicago, when I went to Chicago, like, because I got traded for Secord, right? And Secord and I, like, we fought probably 10 times. And so we, and I used to I wanted to fight him all the time because because I always got the opportunity to play against that line because they wanted me playing against Secord, but against Savard and Larmer. And he was the lefty, right? So I wanted to go lefty against the righty because he wouldn't hold mine, and I wouldn't hold his left, so we could, whatever. And but the guys on the Hawks, they would say, "Oh man, like he hated you so. He hated, like, he absolutely hated." And he was the guy. He said, if you were walking down the street and he saw you coming, he would go across to the other side of the street and whatever, so that because he wouldn't even want to say hi. Well, we ended up being teammates. My last year in Chicago, he came back to Chicago and played with the Blackhawks, and we, it was not tough, but it was kind of odd. Like it was just to become friends because I think it was that rivalry between us, whatever. But it got better as this, and it became friends, and chatted over the years with him and stuff. But there's not too many guys that I mean, you would meet a guy in a bar and you could sit and have a cocktail with the guy, but then the next game, guess what? I might be, something happens. Guess what? We're going, and and that's just the way it was.
I have a question for you about the Probert, the legendary. It was a bench brawl, right?
Yeah.
So you get into the bench brawl, and this is the headbutt fight, John. There's no refs obviously tying you guys up. That's why it ends up being like a 5-minute affair, right?
Yeah.
Like how are you feeling when you're in that situation? Because again, this is sort of like the refs are tied up. It's like with Wilson, in the second fight.
Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, it was one of those. It started, and it started with the fight behind. It was behind the Red Wings net, and it was actually Wendel started fighting with Barry Melrose, who's his cousin. And whatever, and it was funny because Brad Park was coaching the Red Wings, and they weren't very good. They were not a good team. And like Brad Park literally was like, get out there, and like they peeled off their bench first and whatever. And I was on the ice at the time, so I was already kind of. And then it was just like everybody piled in. But next thing you know, it's like, well, I've got Probert, and then we go out by the blue line, and everybody. So Like there's no refs around, and we were wrestling and fighting for 3, 4, 5 minutes kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like exhausted, and I think he was too, and that's why we were standing. And then he decided he was at the perfect shot because he's taller than me, a couple inches on me, and he freaking headbutts me with his helmet on, right square in the face and whatever. He ended up getting a 4-game suspension for that. But anyway, it was it was one of those things for sure.
With that fight too, a lot of people don't know this, or may not know this. There's only like little bits and pieces that are available to watch, so you can only really see the headbutt part, and then there's a little clip. It's like a global newsreel clip of a little bit of the action before that. And it looks like a great fight. But if anyone has that fight out there, we're asking you, like, let's release that footage. Like, we need to see the full fight. It's the holy grail for a lot of hockey fans. They want to see that fight. I remember on the hockey fight boards, people were always trying to find that one. So anyone that used to work at Global or whatever, that was filming that game, like, let's get that clip out there because it's an unreal fight from all accounts. And then the other question I had was, did you fight Joe Kocur in the same game?
You know what? I can't. I fought Joe Kocur once in Toronto. Yeah, in Toronto. I don't know if it was that game or not.
I was looking at the score. I was looking at a box score, and it.
Yeah. And that was because Joey, that was the first time I fought him was in when I was in Toronto, and then in Chicago I fought him. Oh man, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, and then the last time we fought, I was with the Islanders, and it was in preseason against the Rangers, and it was one of those ones where I got a lucky one in there, and we both went down, whatever, but. Again, it's funny because it's interesting how, because Joey and I was the same way too. Like, like when I would fight, like if the guys fell down on the ground, hey, the fight was done. Like I'm not fighting when we're down, and hey, good fight, whatever, and you let go and get. And that's the way Joey Kocur was always that way too. Eh? Every time we fought, like we would be like whatever, but as soon as we went down on the ice, it's like okay, oh, good fight, and whatever, and we skate away and. And, it's interesting how some guys get where they want to just keep, like they get down on the ice and they want to keep going and wrestling, keep going. It's like, you know what? Anyway.
Haven't got their licks in, right.
Yeah. Well, with Kocur, was he a guy that you were wary of because of that right-hand sledgehammer? I mean, he knocked out a lot of guys pretty bad with that. Was he a guy that you were paying close attention to that right?
Oh, yeah. And, there was a reason why I always, with my helmet, when I played, I always, my chin strap, I had done up fairly tight so that, you get guys whose chin straps hang down here and every time they get hit, their helmet falls off and whatever. Well, for me, I always want to make sure my helmet stayed on whenever possible because, it certainly saves your head. And that first fight I had with Joe Kocur, the one in Toronto, he hit me in the helmet. And I'll tell you, if I didn't have my helmet on, I don't know what would have happened, but it wouldn't have been good. Because you're right. Sure. I mean, he absolutely hit like a freaking jackhammer, man. And he hurt a lot of guys in his career. And I was fortunate that he didn't do too much damage to me.
Yeah, for sure. And when you guys were playing, so like you got Probert and Kocur were sort of like a notorious tag team out there. When you're coming into a game against those guys, are you at any of your, like, guys that you're riding shotgun with kind of looking like, who am I going to get? Or is there anyone like, hey, I'm fighting Probert this game, like, let me take that one? Is there anyone,
Well, it's interesting. There's not, I don't think that there was that many tough guys that were going, okay, I'm taking Probert tonight.
Yeah.
You can have, like, well, it's kind of like, they were arguably 1-2. At one time. I mean, they were the bad boys, Detroit's bad boys, right?
The Bruce Brothers.
But, it was interesting because when I went to Chicago, I mean, gosh, we had, like Dave Manson was there. Then we ended up with, Mike Peluso was there at the end, Stu Grimson. So we were tough as any team in the league. And, it was one of those things where, hey, the one thing I guess was that, the rest of the guys on your team is, hey, guys, you go play your game tonight because don't worry, we got you covered. And, we could take care of business and make sure that our skilled guys felt comfortable. They could go out there and do their thing because we had certainly enough firepower out there to take on any team in the league for sure.
Nice. We have a couple of our fans of our podcast and friends who had some questions that I wanted to ask you. Our buddy Steve Booth, who actually connected us, Steve wanted me to ask you if you had any stories of Jim Korn, any Korn stories.
Well, Jimmy Korn, like I'll tell you, he was such a big man. Like, I mean, he was 6'4", 6'5", and he played at 225. And, Jimmy was a guy, he was real tough, but he was a guy, he didn't really want to be a fighter. And but he stuck up for his teammates. And then I remember when he went to Buffalo and, I fought him and whatever there. And he's just one of those guys where I think, you have to have the mentality of, if you're going to be, I did it for, my 3 years in junior and then 13 years as a pro. So a lot of years, and there's lots of guys, who, are tough guys, or there's lots of guys who say, well, I'm a tough guy, and they get punched out one time, and guess what? They don't want to fight anymore. And
they learned a little something about themselves.
A true tough guy is, guess what? I got my lunch handed to me, but tomorrow night, guess what? I'm right back out there doing it again. And believe me, it's not an easy job. And Jimmy Korn, like that Bobby Nystrom fight that he got in, I thought that really hurt Corny as far as, just his whole, wanting to be that guy. I mean, like, he was a guy, he went to Providence College, he was a college player. He wasn't really, I think he was forced to sort of be that guy because look how big you are and whatever, and you've got to be this guy. But you have to have the mentality to do that. And, and Jimmy, really, I think thought he was better than being a tough guy. And I think all of us, like guys, you fought, you were just a tough guy, whatever. Well, you don't play 700 games in the National Hockey League if you can't play. You will be able to do some other stuff. And I think that you ask any tough guy is like, you know what? Yeah, we can play. We can play. We can make contributions. We're not just down sitting on the bench for one thing. And hopefully, Jimmy, I think was played long enough and certainly showed that he was more than just that tough guy. That's for darn sure.
The other one that Steve was asking about is the Larry Playfair fights. Did you fight him twice?
Yeah, I fought him twice. The first time it was interesting because it was the last exhibition game. My first year, and we had played the Sabres in Toronto earlier in the week, and there was a guy, he absolutely ran over one of our players, and I don't even know who the guy was, but I just skated over and like ran into him, and I like gave it to him big time. Well, then I find out he was some Finnish guy. I was like, oh God, go to the penalty box. It's like, oh, I feel shame, right? So 4 or 5 days later, last exhibition game, it was on the Sunday evening in Buffalo, and in second period, there's a face-off, and Larry Playfair's lined up as the left winger beside me in our defensive zone. And anyway, so when the puck dropped, I dropped my gloves and we fought. And after the game, I had a couple of the Buffalo reporters came and said, "Oh, that's the first time we've seen Larry Playfair lose and whatever what." And I was kind of like, "Oh, well." anyway, all I know is I was scared for my life, thinking Playfair is going to rip my head off. So I survived it, but that's how I ended up making the team. I think that had a long ways going to a reason why I made the team. And then I fought him one other time, and he was playing for LA Kings. Wasn't a great fight by any means. But again, he was just one of those guys. Like, if you saw the size of his hand, it was like, oh my God, it's probably twice the size of mine. And you can see why, if he ever really got a hold of you and tagged you, he could do some serious damage to you.
Oh yeah, he was putting out some lights back in the day.
Oh boy.
Who do you think is the guy that probably hit you the hardest that you can remember?
Well, when I came back to play for the Leafs in 92, 93, we were in March, we were in Edmonton, and I fought Louis DeBrusque, and we had tried to get into it and didn't happen, and we both got offsetting minors. So when that was back when they had the 4-on-4, and it wasn't 4-on-4, it was just a coincidental minor. So you sat in the box, you couldn't come out until there was a whistle.
Yeah.
Well, when the whistle came out, we both came out of the box, and we squared off, and when I went to come in, whatever, he tagged me with one, and it was like, oh my. I remember going, I obviously threw a punch as well, because he had a little nick on him where he was bleeding, but all I know is I open my eyes, and I'm splashing water on my face in the dressing room, whatever, and it's like, well, how did I get here, and whatever,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. I had no idea what the hell was going on, and my friggin' jaw was sore and whatever, and about a week later, after I couldn't practice or couldn't do, because it was, the doctor checked through, we had special x-rays done, whatever, and I had a broken jaw. So I ended up with my jaw wired shut for 8 weeks and whatnot. But so Louis, the hardest hit ever, Louis DeBrusque, he did that one for sure.
And
did he knock you out, or were you just concussed?
Well, I mean, we both, like, he hit me and we both went down, but I apparently got up, and I because they sent us both to the dressing room, I walked I went straight to the dressing room, whatever, but I don't remember any of that. I was like,
right.
Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, man.
Was there anyone that like you wish you could have got a chance to fight that you never got a chance to go with?
It's funny, because I mean, I guess it was one of those things where I never fought Ty Domi, and it was one of those things where I never really, I mean, it was one of those things where he was coming, he was like in his first couple of years when I was on my way out, and it was one of those things where, man, if you beat him, it was like, okay, well, you beat him, you're the bigger guy, right?
Yeah.
And if he knocked you out, because I'll tell you, could he do that? Ty was so tough, and you know what, and I just love the fact, and Craig Berube is another one of those guys. Both those guys, they play over 1,000 games in the National Hockey League, and and it's like, guys, you have to give those guys such massive marks, because to go through the ebbs and flows of trying to survive and to fight and be that guy, and then still allow you to continue to work on your game, to be able to stick around, to say, how many guys have played 1,000 games in the National Hockey League? The number's not massive, and those guys, and being tough guys to be able to play 1,000 games, that is an unbelievable milestone.
Absolutely. And you had a pretty nice long career too, and you kind of saw the evolution of your role, and how everyone, a lot of guys became two-handed fighters, all the way up, like Domi and Berube both could throw both hands. But you mentioned that earlier that like you kind of liked fighting lefties.
Yeah.
Was that, and you're a righty though, right? So
Yes,
you
I am. Yeah.
you like getting in on.
Yeah, and that was because, everybody was so good at, they grab your right and whatever. So then you would have to, try and get it loose or whatever. And it was one of those. So I like actually one of the like a great scrap, and it was righty against lefty. Couple of my favorite long good fights too. Myself and Gary Roberts. Huge long fight, lefty righty.
That's unreal.
There was one back in the day against the Minnesota North Stars, Brad Maxwell, lefty against righty. And actually, the fight started when they were going for commercial break. Came back from the commercial break. We were just breaking up. So it was a big long fight. And also another one. It was at the end of a game. I think my first year against Colorado Rockies, Rob Ramage, lefty against righty, and it was a good one too because I always know you're gonna have to take some to give some, but it was always good when you would fight a lefty because they weren't holding your right. So it was one of those ones that generally were darn good fights to watch.
Totally. We were watching all your fights all week, and you've been keeping us entertained. The Gary Roberts fight, that's one of my favorites of all time. And I just watched the Maxwell one again before we came on. And yeah, that's, absolutely rock'em sock'em robots.
Yeah.
Anyone that's listening, check that fight out. It's on YouTube. And then another fight that we watched that I thought was another good example of how you did really well against lefties is John Kordick. Who was,
Johnny K. Yeah.
Yeah. What was like? So at that time, he'd already been with Montreal when he was he was in Toronto, and you'd been traded to Chicago at the time. What was his reputation before that for you? Like you kind of knew.
Oh yeah, I mean, I knew Johnny Kordick a little bit because after my first year in Toronto in the summertime, the Leafs sent me to power skating. Audrey Bakewell was a power skating teacher in Edmonton. And so there was a bunch of us that went to a couple of weeks of power skating school, and Johnny Kordick was there along with a bunch of other guys and whatever. So that's where when I first met him, and he was still playing junior at the time. But when he came in, he was tough, man. Oh man, he was so tough, and you knew that you better be ready and you better be swinging because he could sure throw that left hand, but. That was a good scrap. It was both of us got our licks in on that one for sure.
The machine guns were going, and you got them leaking at the end. It was that's a great fight. I think that's awesome. I'm just trying to think. John, are you back or we lost you for a minute? Okay, maybe he's not. I can hear you now. Yeah, did you have any questions? I don't want to keep Bob on for too much longer, but
no. I mean, hey, listen, this is your wheelhouse. Yeah, I was wondering, did you ever have any teammates that you wanted to fight and got an opportunity to fight, or teammates that you never wanted to fight, and then then you're on another team and you got to scrap them?
Oh, yeah. Actually, it was funny. Gary Nyland, him and I were defense partners in Toronto. And then he went to Chicago as a free agent. And so we're playing in Chicago. John Brophy was the coach. And we're playing in Chicago one night. And first period, Nyland, he ends up getting in a scrap with Steve Thomas. And he kind of gave it to Stumpy a little bit. Had the upper hand with him. And sitting on the bench, and John Brophy comes down the bench. He goes, "When he comes out of the penalty box, you're going to get him under." Brophy. So I'm sitting there for waiting for them for the 5 minutes. Well, oh my God. Well, so when the whistle went and Thomas and them were standing up in the penalty box, the whistle goes. So I jumped onto the ice. And Nyland comes out of the box with Thomas, and I ran into Nyland and hit him. We were defense partners for a couple of years. He was like, "Net," and I was like, "Hey, Ny, gotta go ya." And so when we fought, and it was just one of those ones where you kind of had to do because of what transpired earlier. But Yeah, not too many guys that, like, that I played with that I wanted to fight. And I was a guy that kind of I got along with almost all my teammates, right? I mean, to me, I was I was all about the team. I thought anyway was that the team always came first and whatnot. But you've gotta you see things happen and you got to take care of business and sometimes it is something like that where it's a guy or you don't want to fight that guy, but guess what, you have to because what
yeah.
that's what
it's
you're
so funny. It's so funny. It's like when he gets out of that box.
oh yeah,
like,
my and like his voice would get like, oh my god, it's like
There was 2 wild cards I wanted to ask you about. One of them, you probably haven't heard this name for a while, but Paul Higgins.
Yeah.
Do you have any Paul Higgins stories? Steve was asking me.
Paul Higgins, and it's one of those things where back in the day they changed it. They changed the rule, not rules, but they made a change in the NHL because of Paul Higgins. And it was like, after when a period ended, remember guys could come off the bench and skate around and warm up. Guys, if you didn't play a lot, me and Jeff Brubaker, we used to, after the period was over, if we only didn't play very much, we'd, skate a couple laps just to get your legs going a little bit. And we used to call it the Sluggo Shuffle. We'd say, hey, and we'd sing a song to each other as we'd sing it. Go on. Paul Higgins, he did it twice. And the second time, we're playing the Bruins, Maple Leaf Gardens. And after the second period, the bench is empty to skate around. And he freaking suckers Terry O'Reilly and starts almost like a big, huge brawl. And that was the second time he'd done that. And that's when they within a week, they made the rule you couldn't skate around after the period. You had to go right to the dressing room.
Yeah.
And Paul Higgins. But, Higgy didn't last very long. Unfortunately, it's one of those things. You got to find your niche of, it's one, and I always say to kids today, it's one thing. Hey, you got drafted. Okay, that's number one. Or you've signed an NHL contract. That's one. But it's you get to the NHL. What are you gonna do to stay there? And that's the thing, because it's all about the longevity. How long can you stick around in the league to collect a paycheck, to hopefully win a Stanley Cup or do whatever? Some guys can't find, their niche to help them get to that top level and to stay there. But fortunately for me, I found my little niche and it certainly helped me survive the game and to be able to play 700 games.
Amazing.
700 games is incredible.
That's a great career. And you got to be part of the expansion San Jose Sharks, which is pretty legendary. That's pretty cool. It was interesting because, I played so for three previous years before expansion. We lost in the conference finals to Calgary in '89. They won the cup. We lost to Edmonton in the conference finals in '90. They won the cup. '91, we won the President's Trophy because but I think what happened was we were wondering who we were going to play in the conference finals before the playoffs started, and we ended up Minnesota beat us in the first round. They went all the way to the finals. They lost to Mario in the finals there. Yeah.
John Casey was unreal in goal for them and whatnot. But the next year, the Hawks went to the finals, so that's how good a team that was. But going to San Jose, I remember George Kingston was the head coach, and he always used to say, we can't use expansion as a crutch. We've got to outwork other teams and whatever. And well, I ended up getting traded from San Jose because I lost my shit on the coaches one night after a loss, and because it was like a fucking country club, quite honestly.
Oh, really?
It was like Mike Keenan played for him for 3 years, right? And it was like, if you want to outwork the other team, you have to be in better shape to be able to outwork the other team, whatever. And we didn't like it. It was like, I mean, until you're in it with Keenan and seeing how they drove, and anybody who ever played for Mike Keenan, when they left playing for Mike Keenan, when they would go to other teams, I bet you they do fitness testing and stuff. I bet you they would be one of the top fitness guys, because that was the thing you learned from Mike Keenan. He pushed you to be. You know, I remember the first day of training camp. First time he came to Chicago with training camp, he said, first thing he says, hard work. He says, you have no idea what hard work is, and you're going to find out. And you know what? He was right, because we learned that it was like you had to push. And when I went to San Jose, I was so disappointed because it wasn't that way. Like it was like. It was unfortunate the way things turned out, because I would have loved to have stuck around and played there for a few years, but I did. I ended up getting traded there during the first year at the trade deadline. But it's one of those things where you are, and I believed a certain way things should have been done, and it wasn't, and I ended up getting traded because of that. But that's okay.
But when you ended up coaching later on in your career, did you find that you brought a bit of what Mike Keenan taught you into your own coaching stuff?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. Yeah, I mean, coaching, every coach is different. I mean, my first coaching job in pro, I was an assistant in Hershey with the Hershey Bears, Colorado's farm team, and Bob Hartley was the head coach. And I'll tell you, I learned so much from him. And, I mean, he's won everywhere, right? And, I think every coach that I played for, and I think you learn different things. You take something from all of them to add, to put in your repertoire, to try to get the best out of the players and stuff. And, but it's, I mean, it's interesting because, not everything works right with everybody. So, I tell you, hats off to coaches today that have the longevity. Look at a guy, in Tampa. He's the longest serving coach in the National Hockey League right now, and to be able to stick around with one team for a long time now, I tell you, you got to be like a jack of all trades, right? You've got to be a psychiatrist, babysitter, dad, grandpa, teacher. You got to be everything, right? Because the players today, I mean, it's evolved and changed so much. And coaching today is not an easy gig, man. And all these guys that are doing it, I'll tell you, I take my hat off to them, because it's not an easy thing, I'll tell you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, listen, Bob, we really want to thank you for taking the time to be on the show with us. It's an honor to have you on. An amazing career and so many highlight reel fights. It's been awesome to go through them with you. And it's just been great, guys. This has been Bob McGill, and we're Fight Stories. And make sure you check us out.
Thanks so much for doing it, Bob.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bob.
I appreciate the time. And you know what? It's great talking to you, and hope everybody enjoys the stories.
Oh, I think they will.